Hi, Alison Marsden here from Gardening by Design. Welcome to this box of tricks topic. I do hope that you enjoy using it to help you become a more confident gardener. Please let me know how you get on, and happy gardening.
The year-round garden. Part 1. Something to look at all year round. The photographs that you are seeing now show how beautiful gardens can be as the seasons progress, but clearly each picture was taken in a different garden, and at home we want a fabulous view out of the same windows all year round. As you have probably found out because you're watching this video, this takes some careful planning, and the first step is to be clear about exactly what you're aiming at. The beds and borders that we most commonly see again and again throughout the year are those that we drive or walk past every day, and it is tempting to turn to these for ideas. But they are often not private gardens maintained by busy householders like you and I. They may be in parks, large gardens, open to the public, or perhaps on urban street corners or traffic roundabouts. All these areas clearly need to look good all year round, but they are not necessarily good models for our own gardens. Let's take a look at a couple of examples to see why. This picture shows one way to ensure that you have something to look at all year round, and I call this car park planting, also frequently seen around supermarkets and new build houses and flats. The emphasis is on providing three-dimensional green shapes right through the challenging winter months, and to be fair, it is definitely much better than litter and concrete, so frequently the alternative. It's fairly low maintenance and does suit the situation here. But while the advantage is greenery in winter, I'm sure you can spot the obvious downside, which is, yes, it will look exactly the same in spring, summer and autumn too. And of course at home we want much more colour and interest to reflect the seasons. To be honest, you can do rather better than this for winter too. So how about copying this city centre scheme? It certainly packs a punch colour-wise, although of course you could choose a subtler effect if you prefer. I took this photograph in spring, as the mix of tulips and pansies indicates. And this is the key to why it is probably not what most of us are looking for at home. Have you spotted the drawback? Well, as you can see, all these plants flower at the same time, spring in this case, and are being used as short-term seasonal colour. The beds would need to be completely replanted at least 3 times a year with a different range of plants to keep this level of display all year round. Now that's a great idea for a public park or for a few pots by your front door, but not for the whole garden. It would mean a level of effort and cost that few of us are prepared realistically to put in. So you want something way more interesting than a car park, and much less effort than short-term seasonal planting. It's clear then that we're aiming at a garden with plenty of colour and interest that reflects the seasons and is realistic to look after. And the question that you are now asking is, how exactly do I achieve that? Well, the short answer is diversity, a range, not just of different plants, but of different plant types. There is a place for evergreen shrubs and for brightly coloured bedding, not to the exclusion of everything else, but as part of a garden containing bulbs, cottage garden perennials, grasses, climbers, and a mix of evergreen and deciduous shrubs and trees. And a few plants that last just one season. Of course, there's nothing wrong with a bit of horticultural bling. Yes, I know that might sound like a tall order for a modest-sized garden, but it is possible, and it is surprising what you can fit in when you know how. That's what I'll share with you a little bit later. Firstly, though, we'll step back and consider the basic principles for creating a year-round garden at home. Principle 1. The overall layout and the hard landscaping are vital to creating a successful garden. We all know that the layout is important in every garden in terms of style and practicality, but sometimes we can forget how it contributes to an attractive outlook, particularly in winter when foliage and flowers are in short supply. Of course, I know that most of you are probably not intending to rebuild your garden completely, so don't worry. The emphasis of this topic is on choosing plants to provide interest all year round. But an important step is to analyse which elements of the layout and hard landscaping are helping, like this beautiful stone wall and waterfall, and which are hindering, when the mass of planting has died down and the shapes, fences, walls and pergolas or whatever are left to provide outline and structure in winter. This photograph is of a temporary show garden, but makes very clear how a layout of strong, clean shapes, stylish features and complementary materials will give you a head start and provides a great backdrop to fantastic planting. But if you're not starting from scratch and not planning major hard landscaping work, then at least you will know where the planting has to work harder, adding permanent height, providing a focal point, or disguising a less than lovely corner. So if you can't have carved stone walls as the backdrop to your garden seat, maybe you can have carved evergreen walls instead. And that is principle 1, that the overall layout and the hard landscaping are vital to creating a successful garden all year round. It'll be helpful at the end of part 1 to go out into your garden and take a fresh look at the layout and landscaping. Start to identify the areas that will rely on planting for privacy, structure or colour, especially in winter. And so this leads us nicely on to the second principle, that a garden is a partnership of the hard landscaping and a whole variety of plants that soften the hard lines and provide change through the seasons, heralding spring after winter and so on. And to achieve this, you need to draw on the whole range of plant types that I introduced a few slides ago. This picture illustrates exactly how plants can be used to soften lines, provide fullness, and blur the boundaries of a garden. The layout is crisp and clean, with a large rectangular pond and strong vertical supports for the shelter. You can also see a wide range of plant shapes, sizes and types, from low ground cover, the irises shooting up out of the water, clipped evergreen shrubs, right up to the trees, carefully chosen to provide height while remaining in proportion with the garden. Now, this is not a crash course in garden design, that's a topic for another day, and your all-year garden can and will reflect exactly the style that you want, but the message is clear. Principle 2 is that a garden is a partnership between hard landscaping and a whole variety of plants that mark the passing of the seasons. And on to principle 3. Don't panic, this is the last one. There are 3 key elements to a garden: the layout, the planting, and underpinning them is how you use the garden. We have looked at the first 2 already, and principle 3 applies this final element to the year-round garden. And there is good news. When you consider how you use the garden, especially in the off-season, from autumn to early spring, making it look good all year round may well turn out to be a smaller task than you thought. Because principle 3 is simply to start with the areas that you use or look at most frequently all year round. Take a moment to think about where you need colour and interest in your garden through late autumn, winter and early spring. Does every square metre have to shine? For example, if you have a long garden, partially divided into rooms, do you need the furthest parts to be fabulous in winter? Probably not if you rarely wander down there. In a moment the pause button will appear, and you might like to click pause on your video and look up from your screen and out of the window. Obviously this won't work if you're watching this on a train. But think about which of your rooms at home need a good view and a focal point to catch your eye from indoors all year round. Likely candidates might be the room you eat in, or the kitchen, so that there is something nice to look at over the washing up. Of course, it's easy to say all rooms, and we all want our whole garden to look great all year round eventually. But you're more likely to succeed by prioritising one bed or border to work on first, and then looking at other areas next season. Remember to click the resume video button afterwards. In addition, there is one area easily overlooked when we are getting excited about gardening that does need to look good 365 days a year. Suggestions? Okay, I rather gave that one away with the photograph. It's your front garden. Because all year round, whatever the weather, you might not be out back gardening, but you will come and go through your front garden. Friends and neighbours pass by, and it's open to general scrutiny. So this is definitely one place where there may be a greater balance of interest between the seasons rather than focusing on one huge blast of colour in summer. Of course, if you come and go through your back garden instead, part of that will be a priority too. And there we have it, Principle 3. Start with the areas that you use or look at most frequently all year round. In summary then, there are 3 key elements of a garden: the layout and landscaping, the planting, and driving these the way that you want to use the garden. And thinking about each of these in turn has given us the 3 basic principles for creating a year-round garden. 1. Identify where layout and landscaping help or hinder. 2. Use a wide variety of plant types to provide interest in all seasons. 3. Start with the areas you use most frequently all year round. As with all good principles, these are simple, will get you started, and stop the detailed design process from drifting off course. But we need to add some flesh to the bones, and this is where the real fun starts. It's time to start thinking about choosing the plants. The challenge with choosing plants for your garden is precisely that, making the choice out of the thousands of plants that are on offer in nurseries and garden centres, and the even wider choice it opens up when you look online. The key is to reduce the number of choices to something far more manageable, and there are 2 basic criteria. Suitability, namely will the plant thrive in my garden, and appearance, including what the plant offers in different seasons. Between them, these 2 considerations will filter out masses of plants and leave you with a reasonable selection to choose from, all of which meet your design needs and will grow happily for you. The topic of plant suitability is again one for another occasion, but please don't neglect this, or you are likely to be frustrated by plants that don't thrive, or even don't survive at all. And today we are concerned with what a plant adds visually to your garden. I have been talking about colour and interest all year round, and for plants this basically boils down to colour and texture. That's shorthand for size, shape, and characteristics such as whether it's solid or airy and wafts about in the breeze. Here is a photograph of a double border taken in high summer, and my question to you is, what provides most of the colour and texture that we appreciate in summer? I hope that you said flowers and possibly mentioned foliage, otherwise known as the leaves. It is pretty obvious that mid-spring to the end of summer is the natural flowering period for the vast majority of the plants that we grow in our gardens. So many plants flower in summer that we can even limit our choice to a single colour, like these white borders, and still fill the bed. However, when it comes to the other seasons, we need to look a little wider and be a bit more imaginative on our choice of plants. And the first step is to think about how plants can provide colour and texture apart from through the flowers. The birds will twitter quietly for a few moments while you decide what parts of a plant can be decorative in addition to the flowers. It might help to know that I have listed 5 in total on the next slide. How did you do? My answers are flowers, foliage, berries, seed heads, and stems and bark. So, a few words about each category. Flowers are not just for summer. You can have something in flower in the garden every month of the year, but that will be something, not everything. Foliage is great because it lasts much longer than flowers, even if the plant isn't evergreen. Think about a shrub that loses its leaves in autumn and regrows new ones in spring. It still has leaves for 7 or 8 months. And if the leaves are colourful and the main point of interest, you get that impact for the whole time, plus possibly flowers for a few weeks, and fabulous autumn colour too. Berries and seed heads both come as a natural consequence of flowers, so they're an obvious benefit on some plants. The difference is generally that you get berries on trees and shrubs and seed heads on perennial plants. Both appear in late summer and often last on the plant as it goes into hibernation, before finally falling to the ground or being eaten through the winter, and they're a great food source for wildlife. Stem and bark is probably the most obscure category and easily overlooked, but there are a few well-known shrubs and small trees that look great once the leaves have fallen, with coloured stems or peeling bark. As well as individual points of interest, it is worth including plants whose overall size and shape make a contribution to the structure of the garden. These could be evergreen or deciduous. We need height and bulk even in winter to avoid the garden feeling simply too, well, empty when the non-woody summer flowers start to die back. The final video in this topic looks in more detail at the selection of plants for the year-round garden, but here is a sneak preview of some flowers that you can expect in winter and examples of other plants to show just how colourful plants can be without flowers. Of course, all these plants are hardy and permanent, at least in the UK. This is where plant suitability comes in, if you have a different climate. And this is a key point. By choosing mainly plants that will live for many years, immediately reduces the time and effort needed to maintain the garden, which has to be good news. Well, there's no prizes for originality with snowdrops, but they're rightly popular, a great garden plant, and the first of the bulbs to poke their heads up, really heralding the end of winter. This fabulous Clematis serosa decorates my front fence, flowering in February when there's very little else out. It looks delicate, but really it's very hardy. I simply couldn't limit myself just to 2 pictures to illustrate foliage. It shows that evergreen doesn't have to be green. This Eleagnus on the left is a large, strong bush with brightly coloured splashes down the centres of the leaves. It's good in sun or partial shade. It's not subtle, but it always makes it look like the sun's shining and is great as a focal point in the far corner of the garden. The purple Cotinus is completely different. Big, dark purple leaves that turn copper or bright red depending on the temperature as autumn comes through. And finally, it might surprise you to know that quite a lot of perennials are evergreen too. This is a heuchera. They come in a mass of different foliage colours. The flowers die off, but you get a mound of these lovely soft-shaped leaves, every colour from lime green to nearly black, all through the winter. When we think of berries, probably evergreen shrubs spring to mind, like this Skimmia, well known and a great garden plant. But there are also some deciduous shrubs that have great berries, like this Lacestaria. Deep maroon strigs form in late summer and hold on through into the autumn. A lot of ornamental grasses have great seed heads that last well into the winter. The Miscanthus variety in the photograph forms a fountain roughly 1 metre tall, but there are upright forms that will reach well over 2.5 metres, and there are many more grasses of every size and colour. Iris vetidissima is an evergreen perennial, whose fans of dark green leaves provide a backdrop to the vivid orange seeds through autumn and winter. Of course there are flowers beforehand, but these are fairly dowdy and not the main reason to grow the plant. And stems and bark. Not that many plants to choose from, but these are 2 great ones. This is willow. It's been coppiced probably every couple of years just to get new growth. And like the dogwood, the cornus, the brightest colour is on the new stems. So again, the orange-red colourway. And the good old birch. This is a Himalayan birch. It's one in my garden. It's leaning over slightly. It's not just a wonky photograph. Really, really white bark. rather whiter bark and a smaller, more delicate tree than our native silver birch. So good for a small garden. If you've got a lot of space though, native silver birch is a really, really good choice too. All of which brings us back to the Olympic rings of providing colour and texture all year round. And so we are nearly at the end of part 1 of this topic. Right at the start, I said that the short answer to the question, how can I have changing interest all year for a realistic amount of effort, was diversity. And here we really do come full circle, because by choosing plants to give you attractive flowers, foliage, berries, seed heads and bark through the year, you are automatically delving into each of the plant types: spring and summer bulbs, cottage garden perennial plants, ornamental grasses, climbers, and deciduous and evergreen shrubs and trees. Supplement those in summer with some bright bedding and you really will have a great garden. And so in summary, we have established the principles of creating a year-round garden. 1. Identify where layout and landscaping help or hinder and plants may have to fill the gaps. 2. Use a wide variety of plant types to provide interest through all the seasons. And 3. Start with the areas you use most frequently all year round. And we have considered how to put these into practice and choose the plants to fill beds and borders with something to look at throughout the year. The year-round garden changes through the seasons. The majority of planting is permanent, and the plants survive the winter to live for many years. You have to look beyond flowers to create interest from colour and texture all year round. And bulbs, cottage perennials, grasses, climbers, shrubs and trees, and some seasonal plants of course, all have a part to play. Before we take a break, you have a little homework. Personally, I always find wandering out into the garden with a mug of tea helps the thought process here. So as you think back over this video, look at the permanent features in your garden. Do they enhance it all year round? Do they need disguising? Note plants in your garden with interesting foliage, stems, bark, seed heads or berries. It's likely you'll already have a few, you may just not really have appreciated them for what they offer. Think about which plants have more than one season of interest, and identify areas that need more interest from plants in each season. When you come back and are ready to watch the video for part 2, we'll be looking at the tricky question of how to fit all those different plants into a single bed or border. See you soon.